Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West. Thank you for joining me for First Stage Friday. Now, when I started Series 10 in early June, I began reading through Of Tuor and His Coming to Gondolin. At the time, I thought it would take all of Series 10 and even much of Series 11. As it turns out, we're not even going to finish it up here in Series 12, but we will get closer. Today, we hear the first part of Voronwë's tale. Now Tuor and Voronwë made ready to depart. Tuor took with him the small bow and arrows that he had brought, beside the gear that he had taken from the hall. But his spear, upon which his name was written in the elven runes of the north, he set upon the wall in token that he had passed. No arms had Voronwë, save a short sword only. Before the day was broad, they left the ancient dwelling of Turgon, and Voronwë led Tuor about, westward of the steep slopes of Taras and across the great cape. There, once the road from Nevrast to Brethambar had passed, that now was but a green track between old turf-clad dikes. So they came into Beleriand and the north region of the Falas, and turning eastward they sought the dark eaves of Ered Wethrin, and there they lay hid and rested until day had waned to dusk. For though the ancient dwellings of the Falathrim, Brethambar and Eglarest, were still far distant, orcs now dwelt there, and all the land was infested by the spies of Morgoth. He feared the ships of Círdan that would come at times raiding to the shores, and join with the forays sent forth from Nargothrond. Now as they sat shrouded in their cloaks as shadows under the hills, Tuor and Voronwë spoke much together. And Tuor questioned Voronwë concerning Turgon, but Voronwë would tell little of such matters, and spoke rather of the dwellings upon the Isle of Balar, and of the Lisgarth, the land of reeds at the mouths of Sirion. There now the numbers of the Eldar increase, he said. For evermore flee thither of either kin from the fear of Morgoth, weary of war. But I forsook not my people of my own choice. For after the Bragolach and the breaking of the siege of Angband, doubt first came into Turgon's heart that Morgoth might prove too strong. In that year he sent out the first of his folk that passed his gates from within, a few only, upon a secret errand. They went down Sirion to the shores about the mouths, and there built ships. But it availed them nothing, save to come to the great Isle of Balar, and there establish lonely dwellings far from the reach of Morgoth. For the Noldor have not the art of building ships that will long endure the waves of Belegaer the Great. But when later Turgon heard of the ravaging of the Falas, and the sack of the ancient havens of the shipwrights that lie away there before us, and it was told that Círdan had saved a remnant of his people and sailed away south to the Bay of Balar, then he sent out messengers anew. That was but a little while ago, yet it seems in memory the longest portion of my life. For I was one of those that he sent, being young in years among the Eldar. I was born here in Middle-earth, in the land of Nevrast. My mother was of the grey elves of the Falas, and akin to Círdan himself. There was much mingling of the peoples in Nevrast in the first days of Turgon's kingship. And I have the sea heart of my mother's people. Therefore I was among the chosen, since our errand was to Círdan, to seek his aid in our shipbuilding, that some message and prayer for aid might come to the lords of the West ere all was lost. But I tarried on the way, for I had seen little of the lands of Middle-earth, and we came to Nantathrin in the spring of the year. Lovely to heart's enchantment is that land, Tuor, as you shall find, if ever your feet go upon the southward roads down Sirion. There is the cure of all sea-longing, save for those whom doom will not release. There Ulmo is but the servant of Yavanna, and the earth has brought to life a wealth of fair things that is beyond the thought of hearts in the hard hills of the north. In that land Narog joins Sirion, and they haste no more, but flow broad and quiet through living meads, and all about the shining river are flag lilies like a blossoming forest, and the grass is filled with flowers like gems, like bells, like flames of red and gold, like a waste of many-colored stars in a firmament of green. Yet fairest of all are the willows of Nantathrin, pale green or silver in the wind, and the rustle of their innumerable leaves is a spell of music. Day and night would flicker by uncounted, while still I stood knee-deep in grass and listened. There I was enchanted and forgot the sea in my heart. There I wandered, naming new flowers, or lay a dream amid the singing of the birds and the humming of bees and flies. And there I might still dwell in delight, forsaking all my kin, whether the ships of the Teleri or the swords of the Noldor. But my doom would not so, or the Lord of Waters himself, maybe, for he was strong in that land. So, Tuor and Voronwë leave the region where the halls of Vinyamar lay, heading away from Mount Taras and into Beleriand. So naturally, Tuor starts to ask questions of Voronwë. After all, this guy came from Gondolin. He knows Turgon. He can tell him the stories that he wants to hear. But the elf is reluctant to tell those stories, and instead talks about the elves to the south whose community is growing, refugees of war. And finally, he begins to tell of his own involvement, and it's connected to his maternal lineage. His mother is kin to Círdan the shipwright himself, and since they were to seek out Círdan, Voronwë, naturally, was chosen. But he's a bit of a wanderer, and he falls in love with Nantathran, the Willow Vale that we talked about on Word Nerd Wednesday this week. There is the cure of all sea longing. Those are strong words from an elf, and it makes me want to experience the beauty of this place myself, where folks in the north literally can't imagine the wealth of fair things growing in the area. Go back and read that long description again, folks. It is unbelievably beautiful, and another reminder of Tolkien's incredibly descriptive prose. Now, before we wrap up, I want to point out that there is nothing in the Silmarillion that refers to this idea of Gondolin refugees settling on the Isle of Balar. And Christopher Tolkien points this out in a very useful footnote, where he first draws our attention to a paragraph in the Silmarillion covering this journey. Turgon believed also that the ending of the siege was the beginning of the downfall of the Noldor, unless aid should come, and he sent companies of the Gondolindrim in secret to the mouths of Sirion and the Isle of Balar. There they built ships and set sail into the uttermost west upon Turgon's errand, seeking for Valinor, to ask for pardon and aid of the Valar, and they besought the birds of the sea to guide them. But the seas were wild and wide, and shadow and enchantment lay upon them, and Valinor was hidden. Therefore none of the messengers of Turgon came into the west, and many were lost, and few returned. Now, Christopher does go on to point out that one of the early drafts acknowledges that the Noldor hadn't achieved the art of shipbuilding. All the craft that they built foundered or were driven back by the winds. Now, it's that draft that includes the reference to the Isle of Balar, where Turgon ever maintained a secret refuge. Now, in this version, after the Nirnaeth, it's said that Círdan and the remainder of his people fled to Balar and mingled with Turgon's outpost there. But Christopher concludes the footnote with this very decisive point. This element in the story was rejected, and thus, in the published text of the Silmarillion, there is no reference to the establishment of dwellings on Balar by elves from Gondolin. Well, folks, that is it for today's First Stage Friday, and even though this run of First Stage Fridays is much longer than planned, I will eventually get back to Fandom Fridays. So if you know anybody who should join me here for a future Fandom Friday, just email Barliman at theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, monthly hangout, bonus episodes, and more. And join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up this week with Silmarillion Saturday. Podcast listeners, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your apps. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the channel to get all of the PPP productions, including my streaming show, The PPP Plays. And be sure you're following at Prancing Pony Pod on all your social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.